The old bus groaned to a stop in front of the tall iron gates. Daniel pressed his forehead against the window, staring up at the massive stone building that would be his school for the next 3 years. Westbrook Academy looked like something out of a movie, the kind of place where kids wore uniforms that cost more than his mom's monthly rent. He adjusted the straps of his canvas backpack and stepped off the bus. Around him, expensive cars pulled up to the entrance. A sleek black Mercedes, a shiny BMW, even a Porsche. Parents in designer sunglasses kissed their kids goodbye, while drivers unloaded matching luggage sets from trunks. Daniel looked down at his shoes. They were clean, but you could see where his mom had tried to cover the scuff marks with black marker. His blazer had belonged to his older brother 3 years ago. The sleeves were a bit too long, and he'd rolled them up twice, hoping nobody would notice. The first day was exactly what he'd expected. Worse, actually. In homeroom, students compared their summer vacations. Paris, Tokyo, a private island in Greece. One girl complained about how boring the Maldives had been. Daniel had spent his summer helping his mom clean office buildings at night. He didn't mention that. Lunch was the hardest part. The cafeteria was huge, with floor-to-ceiling windows and tables that looked like they belonged in a fancy restaurant. Groups of students clustered together, laughing and talking. Daniel grabbed his brown paper bag from his backpack and looked for somewhere to sit. Every table seemed full. Not physically full, just full, the kind of full where there's technically space, but you know you're not welcome. He recognized the feeling from his old school, but this was different. Here, the divide wasn't just about popularity, it was about money, and everyone could tell who had it and who didn't. He found himself in the library instead. It was quiet there, safe. He ate his peanut butter sandwich while pretending to read a book about ancient Rome. Through the window, he could see other students on the lawn, eating sushi and pasta from the cafeteria's hot lunch menu, the food his mom couldn't afford. Between classes, he heard the whispers. Not loud enough to be direct bullying, but loud enough to make sure he heard. That's one of the scholarship kids. My dad said the board forced them to accept more poor students this year. I don't know why they come here. It's not like they fit in. Daniel kept his head down and walked faster. His mom had been so proud when he got the scholarship. She'd cried happy tears and called all their relatives. This school meant opportunity, she'd said. A chance at a better future. He couldn't tell her how much it hurt to be here. The only good part of his day came during fourth period. He'd signed up for a free block, and while exploring the building, he'd found it. The old music room. It was tucked away in the east wing, past the gym and down a hallway that looked like nobody used it anymore. The door was unlocked. Inside, dust particles floated in the afternoon sunlight. Old music stands leaned against the wall, and in the corner, covered with a faded sheet, was an upright piano. Daniel's heart jumped. He hadn't seen a piano in 3 years. Not since they'd had to sell theirs when his dad got sick. Before the hospital bills. Before everything fell apart. He walked over slowly, almost afraid to touch it. He pulled off the sheet and dust flew everywhere, making him cough. The piano was old. Some of the keys were yellowed. But when he sat down and pressed middle C, the sound was beautiful. His fingers remembered. Even after all this time, they remembered. He started with something simple. A melody his dad had taught him when he was 7. Then something harder. His hands moved across the keys, and for the first time all day, the tight feeling in his chest loosened. Here, it didn't matter what he was wearing or where he came from. Here there was just the music. He didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. Principal Ashford was making her afternoon rounds when she heard the piano. She stopped, her perfectly manicured hand on the doorframe. She watched the boy at the piano for a long moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. She recognized him from the scholarship list. Daniel Torres, single mother. Low income. Charity case. She didn't interrupt. Instead, she turned and walked back down the hallway, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. In her office, she made a note in her planner. The music room. She'd have to keep an eye on that. Principal Ashford had been running Westbrook Academy for 12 years. She'd built its reputation as one of the most elite prep schools in the state. When the board had voted to expand the scholarship program, she'd fought against it in every meeting. These students didn't understand Westbrook's culture. They couldn't contribute to the alumni network. They took spots from legacy families who'd been supporting the school for generations, but the board had overruled her. Something about diversity and opportunity, public relations. She'd smiled and welcomed the scholarship students at orientation, but privately she made sure they understood their place. Daniel didn't know any of this yet. All he knew was that he'd found a sanctuary. Every day during his free period, he slipped into that music room. Sometimes he played for the full hour. Sometimes he just sat at the piano, his hands resting on the keys, gathering strength for the rest of the day. His music teacher, Mr. Harrison, noticed him after the first week. The older man had been teaching at Westbrook for 20 years, and he could spot real talent. He started leaving sheet music on the piano, challenging pieces, the kind that would push Daniel to grow. Daniel devoured them. Late at night, after his mom fell asleep, he'd practice fingering on his desk, moving through the complicated sections silently. In the morning, he'd try them on the piano. The pieces got harder. He got better. Other students rarely came to that wing of the building. It was too far from everything else, which meant Daniel could practice without anyone knowing, without anyone judging, without anyone reminding him that he didn't belong. But he did notice things. The way Bradley Thornton, son of the school's biggest donor, strutted through the hallways like he owned the place. The way the principal smiled at certain families and barely nodded at others. The way money seemed to determine everything at Westbrook, from who got picked for the good sports teams to who got invited to birthday parties. Daniel's mom worked double shifts at the hospital, cleaning floors from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Then she'd come home, sleep for a few hours, and work her day job at the grocery store. All so he could have this opportunity, this chance. Some nights, lying in bed, Daniel wondered if it was worth it. If the loneliness and the constant reminder that he was different was worth the better education everyone kept talking about. But then he'd think about that piano, about how his fingers flew across the keys, about how for those precious minutes each day, he wasn't the poor kid or the scholarship student. He was just Daniel, and the music he created was just as good as anything those rich kids could do, maybe better. He just didn't know that Principal Ashford was watching, waiting. And she had very specific ideas about who deserved to shine at Westbrook Academy, and Daniel Torres wasn't on that list. 3 weeks had passed since Daniel started at Westbrook Academy. He'd figured out the rhythm of survival. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact in the hallways. Eat lunch in the library. And most importantly, treasure those quiet moments in the music room where nobody could make you feel small. Things were about to change. It was a Wednesday morning when Principal Ashford called an assembly. The entire school filed into the auditorium, students chattering and laughing as they found their seats. Daniel sat near the back, as usual, trying to be invisible. Principal Ashford walked onto the stage in her expensive navy suit, her smile bright and practiced. She waited for silence, then began speaking in that polished voice she used for important announcements. Students, faculty, as many of you know, the annual Westbrook Gala is approaching. This event is the cornerstone of our school's fundraising efforts. It's an evening where we showcase the excellence that makes Westbrook Academy the premier institution it is. Daniel had heard about the gala. Everyone talked about it. It was apparently this huge fancy event where rich alumni came back and donated tons of money. Students performed. There was expensive food. Everything was meant to impress the people who kept the school running. This year's gala will be particularly special, the principal continued. We have several distinguished guests attending, including members of the State Board of Education and representatives from our partner universities. She paused for effect, looking across the rows of students. As is tradition, we'll feature a musical performance by one of our most accomplished students, someone who represents the very best of what Westbrook Academy stands for. Daniel felt a small flutter in his chest. For just a second, he let himself imagine it, playing on a real stage, on a real grand piano, in front of an audience who actually wanted to listen. But reality crashed back quickly. He knew how this worked. This wasn't about talent. It was about who your parents were, how much money they donated, what your last name meant. I'm pleased to announce, Principal Ashford said. Her applause erupted from certain sections of the auditorium. Bradley stood up in the third row, waving to his friends like he'd just won an Oscar. His buddies clapped him on the back. A few girls whistled. Daniel wasn't surprised. Bradley's family had donated the new grand piano in the auditorium last year. It probably cost more than Daniel's entire house. Of course he'd be the one performing. After assembly, Daniel headed to music class. Mr. Harrison was setting up sheet music when he walked in. The teacher looked tired, frustrated about something. As other students filtered in, Mr. Harrison started the lesson, but Daniel could tell his heart wasn't in it. They were working on a complicated classical piece, something by Chopin. Most of the students struggled through it, hitting wrong notes and losing the rhythm. "Daniel," Mr. Harrison called out suddenly, "would you demonstrate the middle section? The part we discussed yesterday." Daniel's stomach dropped. He'd been practicing that section on the old upright and he knew it well. But playing in front of the class was different. These kids already had reasons to notice him, to judge him. He started to stand up when the classroom door opened. Principal Ashford walked in, her presence filling the room immediately. Everyone sat up straighter. Mr. Harrison's expression shifted to something between surprise and annoyance. "Don't let me interrupt," she said smoothly. "I'm just observing today, seeing how our music program is progressing." But Daniel noticed where her eyes went, straight to him. It made his skin crawl. "Daniel was just about to demonstrate," Mr. Harrison said, his voice steady. "Please go ahead." Daniel walked to the piano, his hands suddenly sweaty. He sat down, positioned his fingers, and started to play. The music came naturally. His fingers knew what to do. For a moment, he forgot about the principal standing at the back of the room. He forgot about the other students watching. There was just the music. The section was beautiful and complicated. His hands moved smoothly across the keys, hitting every note with precision. The emotion in the piece flowed through him naturally, the way his dad had taught him. "Don't just play the notes. Feel them." When he finished, there was silence. A few students looked impressed. Others just looked confused, like they couldn't understand how the poor kid could play like that. Then Principal Ashford's voice cut through the quiet. "Mr. Harrison, surely one of our more established students should be demonstrating. Perhaps someone whose family actually contributes to our music program." The words hung in the air like poison. Daniel felt his face get hot. He knew what she meant. Everyone knew what she meant. Mr. Harrison's jaw tightened. "Daniel is the most capable student for this particular piece, Principal Ashford. He's been working very hard." "I'm sure he has," the principal replied, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "But let's be realistic. True excellence comes from proper training. Private lessons. The kind of dedication that requires resources. Our scholarship students are here to receive an education, not to represent the school's finest talents." She walked closer to the piano, looking down at Daniel like he was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. These students should focus on their academics and be grateful for the opportunity they've been given. There's no need for them to reach beyond their station. Daniel couldn't breathe. The room felt too hot, too small. Some students looked away, uncomfortable. Others, particularly Bradley's friends in the back, were smirking. They loved this. Loved watching someone get put in their place. "Know your role, son," Principal Ashford added quietly, just loud enough for nearby students to hear.
"Westbrook has been generous enough to give you a chance."
"Don't embarrass yourself by pretending to be something you're not." Daniel stood up from the piano bench. His legs felt shaky. He walked back to his seat, staring at the floor, his face burning with shame. He could feel every eye in the room on him. Mr. Harrison looked furious, but what could he do? She was the principal. She ran the school. Speaking up too much could cost him his job. The rest of the class was a blur. Daniel didn't hear a word of the lesson. He just kept replaying the principal's words in his head. "Know your role. Don't reach beyond your station. Be grateful." When the bell rang, he grabbed his backpack and rushed out. He needed to get away, to disappear. But as he opened his locker, a piece of paper fell out. He picked it up. Expensive cream-colored stationery, the kind sold in the school store that he could never afford. Written in neat handwriting were 6 words that made his stomach turn. "Stay in your lane, charity case." It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. The message was clear. People were watching. People were judging. And they wanted to make sure he never forgot where he came from. Daniel crumpled the note and shoved it in his pocket. He walked through the hallways in a daze, barely seeing where he was going. Students laughed and talked around him, living their easy lives in their expensive clothes with their perfect families. He ended up in the music room. His sanctuary. He sat at the old piano and put his hands on the keys, but for the first time in weeks he couldn't play. His fingers felt frozen. Heavy, Principal Ashford's words kept echoing in his mind. Know your role. These students should be grateful, was she right? Was he being stupid for thinking he could be more than just the poor kid? For thinking his music mattered? Outside the window, the sun was setting. Soon his mom would finish her grocery store shift and head to the hospital for her night cleaning job, working herself to exhaustion so he could be here, so he could have this chance. But what kind of chance was it really, when every day someone reminded him he didn't belong? When playing the piano, the one thing he loved, made him a target. Daniel didn't know that this was just the beginning, that things were about to get much worse before they got better, that sometimes you have to be pushed all the way down before you can rise up. All he knew was that right now, in this moment, he felt more alone than ever. The next 2 weeks were the worst of Daniel's life. Worse than when his dad died, worse than when they lost their house. At least back then, people had been kind. They'd brought food, offered sympathy. Here, cruelty was a sport. The note in his locker had been just the beginning. More appeared. Sometimes crude drawings, sometimes just one word: charity. Poor, worthless. He stopped opening his locker unless absolutely necessary. In the cafeteria, someone accidentally spilled juice on his backpack. His books got soaked. The librarian made him pay for the water damage. $25 he didn't have. His mom had to cover it, taking the money from her grocery budget. They ate rice and beans for a week. Bradley and his friends made a game of it. They'd walk past Daniel in the hallways and drop coins near his feet. "Oops," they'd say loudly. "Better pick those up. You probably need them." Their laughter followed him everywhere. But Daniel kept going to the music room. It was the only place he could breathe. Mr. Harrison had started leaving more challenging pieces for him. Rachmaninoff, Liszt, pieces that required technical skill and emotional depth. Daniel practiced until his fingers ached. He didn't know that Mr. Harrison was fighting a battle of his own. The music teacher had gone to Principal Ashford's office 3 times. 3 times he'd tried to convince her that Daniel deserved a chance. That real talent should be recognized regardless of money or status. "Victoria," Mr. Harrison said during their last meeting, "in 20 years of teaching, I've never encountered a student with Daniel's natural ability. He's teaching himself advanced pieces. He deserves to at least audition for the gala." Principal Ashford didn't even look up from her paperwork. "The gala is about representing our school's values, Harold. It's about thanking the families who make Westbrook possible. The Thornton family donated $200,000 last year alone. Bradley will represent us beautifully. But Daniel's skill level is far beyond enough." Her voice was sharp. "Bradley comes from a family of excellence. Proper breeding, private instruction since age 4. That's what creates true musicians. Not some scholarship student plinking away on a broken piano in a forgotten room." Mr. Harrison stood up, his hands shaking with anger. "You're making a mistake." "What I'm making," Principal Ashford said coldly, "is a decision that protects this school's reputation and honors our benefactors. Daniel Torres is here on charity. He should focus on his studies and be thankful we even let students like him through our doors. This conversation is over." Mr. Harrison left her office feeling defeated, but he didn't give up on Daniel. He couldn't. Real talent like that came along once in a lifetime. The week before the gala, something changed in Daniel. He stopped trying to hide, stopped trying to be invisible. If they were going to mock him anyway, he might as well own who he was. He started eating lunch in the cafeteria instead of the library. Sat alone at a table with his homemade sandwich, daring anyone to say something. Some kids whispered. Others laughed. He ignored them all. In class, when teachers asked questions, he raised his hand. He knew the answers. He'd always known them. His mom hadn't sacrificed everything for him to play small, and in the music room he played louder. The door stayed open. If people heard him, fine. Let them hear. Let them know what real passion sounded like. It was Bradley was at his family's ski house in Aspen. He'd been bragging about the trip for weeks, posting pictures on social media of the mountains and expensive restaurants. His friends commented with jealous emojis and jokes about showing off. Then came the post that changed everything. A photo of Bradley in a hospital room, his right hand wrapped in a cast. 2 fingers clearly broken. The caption read, "Wiped out on a black diamond. R.I.P. to my piano dreams, LOL." His friends flooded the comments. Dude, that sucks. Get better, bro. At least you got the good painkillers. But Bradley's post reached someone else who wasn't sympathetic. Principal Ashford saw it at 7 in the evening while scrolling through the school's social media mentions. Her blood ran cold. The gala was in 2 days. The program was printed. 300 wealthy donors would be attending, expecting a performance. Board members, alumni, potential benefactors. Everything had to be perfect. She immediately started calling other students. Anyone with piano experience. But it was Thanksgiving break. Families had left town for vacation. The Bahamas, Europe, ski trips like Bradley's. Everyone was gone. By 8 o'clock, Principal Ashford was pacing her office, her perfect composure cracking. This couldn't be happening. The performance was a tradition, the highlight of the evening. What would she tell the donors? That's when Mr. Harrison knocked on her door. She looked up, her face tight with stress. Unless you have a solution, Harold, I don't have time for Daniel Torres. Principal Ashford's expression turned to ice. Absolutely not. He's still in town. His family doesn't travel for holidays. I've heard him play Bradley's entire program, plus several other pieces that would be more impressive. I said no. The principal's voice was sharp. I will not have a scholarship student representing this school at our most important event. It sends the wrong message entirely. Mr. Harrison stepped into the office. What message does it send if there's no performance at all? What will you tell the board members? The donors who've been looking forward to this? The silence stretched between them. Principal Ashford's jaw worked, her mind racing through options she didn't have. The minutes ticked by on the expensive clock on her wall. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was cold, controlled. But Daniel's music teacher could hear the rage underneath. Fine. Call him. But if he embarrasses this school, if he makes even one mistake, it will be his last day at Westbrook. I'll find a reason to revoke his scholarship so fast his head will spin. Make sure he understands this is purely out of necessity, not merit, not recognition, emergency, nothing more. Mr. Harrison nodded and left quickly before she could change her mind. He called Daniel at 8:30. The boy's mom answered, sounding tired from her first shift. When she handed the phone to Daniel, Mr. Harrison could hear the confusion in his voice. You want me to what? Perform at the gala. Saturday night. Bradley's injured. You're the only student available who can handle the program. Silence on the other end. Then a shaky breath. Are you serious? Dead serious. Daniel, this is your chance. I know it's not ideal. I know they're only asking because they have no choice. But you can show them. Show everyone what you're capable of. After hanging up, Daniel sat on his bed staring at the wall. His hands were trembling. This was everything he'd dreamed about. A real stage. A real grand piano. An actual audience, but it was also terrifying. Principal Ashford hated him. Half the school mocked him. And now he was supposed to perform in front of the richest, most important people associated with Westbrook. He looked at his hands. These hands that his father had trained, that had learned to play through grief and poverty and loss. These hands that created something beautiful even when everything else was falling apart. He thought about his mom, sleeping in the next room before her night shift. Exhausted but never complaining. Working 2 jobs so he could have opportunities she never had. Daniel stood up and walked to his desk. He pulled out the sheet music Mr. Harrison had given him over the past weeks. Bradley's program, Chopin, some Beethoven, safe, predictable pieces. But at the bottom of the stack was something else. Something harder, more passionate, more real. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto, Number 2, one of the most demanding pieces in classical piano. Beautiful, devastating, the kind of music that required you to pour your whole soul into the keys. Daniel made a decision. If he was going to do this, he wasn't going to play it safe. He wasn't going to be what they expected. He was going to show them exactly who he was. Saturday night, they'd asked for a performance. He was going to give them something they'd never forget. Saturday arrived faster than Daniel expected. He'd barely slept the night before, his mind running through every note, every chord, every transition. His fingers moved constantly against his blanket, practicing in the dark while his mom snored softly in the next room. At noon, she woke up and found him at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. She'd worked until 6 that morning and only had 4 hours of sleep, but the moment she saw his face, she was fully alert. Mijo, what's wrong? He told her everything. About the gala. About Bradley's accident. about how he was the replacement, the emergency backup, how Principal Ashford had made it clear this meant nothing, how everyone at school hated him, how he was probably going to mess everything up in front of the richest people in the city. His mom sat down across from him. She took his hands in hers. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning floors and scrubbing toilets. Hands that worked so he wouldn't have to. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "Your father, God rest his soul, he always told you something. Remember? Music doesn't care about your bank account. It doesn't care about your address or your last name. It only cares about what you feel in here." She pressed her hand against his chest. "But what if I'm not good enough?" "Daniel." Her voice was sharp now. "You've been good enough since you were 5 years old. Those people don't decide your worth. You decide it. You get on that stage tonight and you play like your father is watching. Like I'm watching. Like every person who ever doubted you is watching. And you show them who you really are." She stood up and went to her bedroom. When she came back, she was holding something wrapped in old newspaper. She handed it to him carefully. Inside was a suit. Not new but nice. Dark blue with thin pinstripes. She must have been saving for months to afford it. "Mom, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did. You're going to walk in there with your head high. You're going to look every bit as good as those rich kids, and then you're going to play better than all of them combined." Daniel felt tears burning in his eyes. He hugged her tight, smelling the familiar scent of industrial cleaner and cheap soap and love. By 5 o'clock he was dressed. The suit fit almost perfectly. His mom had even bought him new shoes. Real dress shoes that didn't have scuff marks. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. Mr. Harrison picked him up at 5:30. They drove to the school in silence, both of them nervous for different reasons. When they pulled up to Westbrook, the parking lot was already filling with expensive cars. Valets in bow ties directed traffic. Women in evening gowns and men in tuxedos walked toward the entrance. Daniel's stomach flipped. This was real. This was actually happening. They went in through a side entrance. The building had been transformed. White lights hung everywhere. Fancy decorations covered the walls. In the main hall, tables were set with crystal and china. It looked like something from a movie about rich people. Principal Ashford found them immediately. She looked stunning in a black dress, her hair perfect, her smile cold. "You're here." She looked Daniel up and down with barely disguised disapproval. "Follow me." She led them backstage in the auditorium. Other students were there, preparing for their parts in the program. When they saw Daniel, the whisper started immediately. Some looked confused. Others looked angry. Bradley's friends glared at him with open hostility. Principal Ashford pulled Daniel aside. Her voice was quiet but sharp as glass. "Listen carefully. You will play the program exactly as planned. No improvising. No showing off. When you finish, you will leave through the side exit immediately. Do not speak to any guests. Do not linger. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. "And if you embarrass this school, I will personally ensure your scholarship is terminated. One wrong note could be enough. Remember that." She walked away, leaving Daniel alone backstage. His hands were shaking. He tried to steady them, but the fear was overwhelming. What had he been thinking? He couldn't do this. He was just a kid from the poor side of town who played an old piano in an empty room. Mr. Harrison appeared beside him. "Breathe. Just breathe. You've got this. She's going to kick me out if I mess up, then don't mess up." His teacher smiled. "Daniel, I've been teaching music for 23 years. I've seen hundreds of students. You know what makes you different? You don't just play the notes. You feel them. That's not something you can learn in expensive lessons. That's not something money can buy. That's real. So get out there and be real." Through the curtain, Daniel could hear the auditorium filling up. Voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. These people had no idea who he was. They were expecting Bradley Thornton, the rich kid with the perfect pedigree and the program started. A student gave a speech about school traditions. The principal thanked various donors, her voice warm and gracious. Nothing like the cold tone she used with Daniel. Different faces for different people. Then came the moment. Principal Ashford's voice echoed through the auditorium. "And now, due to unforeseen circumstances, we have a change in tonight's musical program. Performing this evening, Daniel Torres." The applause was polite but thin, confused. Daniel heard someone in the audience whisper, "Who?" Another voice responded. One of the scholarship students, I think. He walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The auditorium was packed. 300 people in formal wear, all staring at him, looking at the poor kid in the borrowed suit. The grand piano sat center stage, a beautiful Steinway gleaming under the lights. Worth more than every possession his family owned combined. Daniel walked to it slowly, sat down. The bench felt different from the old upright. Everything felt different, bigger, more real, more terrifying. He placed his hands on the keys. They were cool and smooth. Perfect. For a moment, he froze. His mind went blank. He couldn't remember the first note. Couldn't remember anything except Principal Ashford's threat and Bradley's friend's laughter and all the notes in his locker telling him he was worthless. Then he heard his mom's voice in his head. Music doesn't care about your bank account, and his dad's voice from years ago teaching him his first song. Close your eyes, Daniel. Feel it, don't think, just feel. Daniel closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let his hands move. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne filled the auditorium. Soft, gentle, beautiful. But something was different. Daniel wasn't just playing the notes. He was pouring everything into them. Every lonely lunch in the library, every cruel comment, every night his mom came home exhausted, every moment he'd felt small and worthless. The pain became music. The anger became passion. The loneliness became something hauntingly beautiful. The whispers in the audience stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. People who'd been checking their phones looked up. Because what they were hearing wasn't what they'd expected. This wasn't some privileged kid who'd been forced to take lessons. This was different. This was real. Daniel's hands moved across the keys with increasing confidence. The piece built and swelled. His fingers flew through complicated sections with perfect precision. But it wasn't the technical skill that captivated them. It was the emotion, raw and honest and impossible to ignore. He finished the Chopin and moved seamlessly into Beethoven. Then Liszt, each piece more challenging than the last. Pieces that Bradley had never even attempted. Daniel played them all perfectly, but more than that, he played them with soul. Near the back of the auditorium, Principal Ashford stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. But beside her, a woman in an elegant silver gown had tears streaming down her face. She was a famous pianist, a Westbrook graduate, and she recognized what she was hearing. True genius doesn't come from privilege. It comes from somewhere deeper, somewhere real. Daniel's fingers hit the final chord. The sound echoed through the auditorium, fading slowly into silence. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire room was frozen. Then it happened. Someone in the front row stood up. Then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. The applause was deafening, not the polite, obligatory clapping from before. This was real, thunderous. People were shouting. Some were crying. Daniel sat at the piano, stunned. His hands were still on the keys, trembling. He couldn't process what was happening. These people, these wealthy strangers who didn't know him, who probably looked down on people like him, were giving him a standing ovation. The woman in the silver gown was pushing through the crowd, moving toward the stage. She reached it first, tears still streaming down her face. Up close, Daniel recognized her. Catherine Winters. World-famous concert pianist. He'd watched her videos online, dreaming of playing half as well as she did. "Young man," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Who trained you? Where did you study?" Daniel's mouth was dry. My dad taught me when I was little. After he died, I just taught myself. YouTube videos, library books, whatever I could find." Catherine's hand went to her mouth. She turned to look at the crowd gathering near the stage. Board members, alumni, donors in expensive jewelry and designer suits. And standing at the back, Principal Ashford, her face pale. "Do you understand what you just witnessed?" Catherine said loudly, addressing the crowd. "This young man is self-taught, and he just performed at a level that most students at top conservatories couldn't achieve after years of expensive instruction." More people pushed forward. An older man in a tuxedo extended his hand. "I'm James Whitmore on the board of directors." "Son, that was extraordinary, simply extraordinary." A woman with diamonds at her throat spoke up. "I've attended this gala for 15 years. I've never heard anything like that. Never." Catherine turned back to Daniel. What's your name? Daniel Torres. Daniel Torres, she repeated like she was memorizing it. I want to offer you a place in my summer conservatory program. Full scholarship. And I'm going to make some calls to Juilliard. They need to hear you play. Daniel felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. But Catherine was already pulling out her phone, already making plans. Other people were offering things too. Private lessons, competition sponsorships, opportunities he'd never dreamed possible. Mr. Harrison appeared at the edge of the stage, grinning so wide his face looked like it might split. He gave Daniel a thumbs up. Behind him, some of the students who'd mocked Daniel in the hallways looked shocked, confused, like they couldn't understand how the poor kid had just become the center of attention. Then, someone else pushed through the crowd. Principal Ashford. Her smile was fixed and tight. She climbed the stage steps and put her hand on Daniel's shoulder like they were old friends. We're so proud of Daniel, she said loudly, performing for the donors. He's a wonderful example of what our scholarship program can achieve. This is exactly why we invest in students from all backgrounds. Daniel stared at her. The same woman who'd told him to know his place, who'd threatened to kick him out if he made one mistake, who'd called him charity and made sure he felt worthless every single day. Now she was taking credit, acting like she'd supported him all along. Catherine noticed. Daniel could see it in her eyes. The way she looked at the principal, then back at Daniel, she understood exactly what was happening. Principal Ashford, Catherine said, her voice cool. I'm curious. If Daniel is such a wonderful example of your program, why was I not informed about him before tonight? Why wasn't he featured from the beginning? The principal's smile faltered. Well, we have many talented students and we try to give everyone opportunities. He was the emergency replacement, someone said. Daniel turned and saw Bradley standing near the stage, his hand still in a cast. For once, he wasn't smirking. He looked uncomfortable. He only got to play because I got injured. The crowd went quiet. People looked at Principal Ashford. Her face went red. I overheard her talking before, Bradley continued, his voice getting stronger. She said scholarship students shouldn't represent the school, that they should know their place. Daniel couldn't believe it. Bradley Thornton, his biggest tormentor, was telling the truth. Defending him. Principal Ashford's mouth opened and closed. That's taken out of context. I simply meant, I know what you meant, Catherine interrupted. Her voice was sharp now. I know exactly what you meant. I was a scholarship student here 30 years ago, and I faced the same treatment, the same prejudice. Some things clearly haven't changed. She turned to address the crowd again. This young man succeeded despite this school, not because of it. And that's something the board should seriously consider. James Whitmore, the board member, nodded slowly. He was looking at Principal Ashford with an expression that wasn't friendly. Others were whispering among themselves. The donors who'd been enjoying their fancy evening were now seeing something they hadn't expected. The ugly truth behind the pretty decorations. The rest of the evening was a blur. People kept coming up to Daniel, shaking his hand, giving him business cards, making offers. Catherine stayed close, protecting him from the overwhelming attention. She exchanged contact information with his mom, who'd been in the audience the whole time, crying happy tears. When it was finally over and everyone started leaving, Mr. Harrison drove Daniel and his mom home. They rode in silence for a while, none of them quite able to process what had happened. Did that really just happen? Daniel finally asked. His mom laughed, squeezing his hand. It happened, mijo. It really happened. The following weeks were strange. Principal Ashford was still there, but something had shifted. The board called several meetings. Rumors spread about diversity initiatives. Policy changes. Some people said she might not last the year. Students treated Daniel differently now, some with respect, others with jealousy. Bradley actually apologized one day in the hallway. It wasn't much, just a quick, sorry for being a jerk, but it was something. The notes in Daniel's locker stopped. The whispers became different. Catherine kept her promises. That summer, Daniel attended her conservatory program. He met other talented musicians from all backgrounds. Kids who loved music as much as he did. Kids who understood what it meant to create something beautiful, even when the world tried to make you feel small. 2 years later, Daniel won a major youth piano competition. The prize included a recording contract and a tour. National news outlets covered the story. The poor kid from the scholarship program who'd taught himself piano and showed up an entire elite school. Westbrook Academy put his picture on their website, used his story in fundraising materials. The irony wasn't lost on Daniel. The school that had tried to hide him now wanted to claim him as their success story, but Daniel didn't hold grudges. He came back to perform at the gala again when he was 18. By then, Principal Ashford had retired. The new principal welcomed him warmly, genuinely. The school had expanded their scholarship program, changed their policies about student performances. His story had forced them to look at themselves and change. Before he played that night, Daniel spoke to the audience. He talked about his journey, about his mom working 2 jobs, about feeling worthless and invisible, about a teacher who believed in him, about music being the one thing that saved him. Talent doesn't care where you come from, he said, echoing his mother's words. It doesn't care about your bank account or your last name. What matters is whether you're brave enough to share your gift with the world, even when people tell you you're not good enough. He sat at the same Steinway grand piano, placed his hands on the keys, and as the first notes filled the auditorium, Daniel smiled. Because this time he wasn't playing as the poor kid or the charity case or the emergency replacement. He was playing as himself, and that was enough. That had always been enough. The music he created that night was beautiful, but more beautiful was the truth it represented. That sometimes the people who try hardest to hold you down end up being the ones who push you to rise higher than you ever imagined possible. And sometimes